What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the Altar again, and this time we are here with Joey of the Almighty Armored Saint. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. It is so great to have you here, man.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's an honor to be able to talk with you. I've had a couple of Armored Saint interviews back, but I feel like this is the most important one because 40 years of March of the Saints. I mean, 40 years, and I just wanted to know, because I wasn't around at that time. I was only negative 11 years old when that record saw the light of day. But I'm just when you
Ouch.
when you look at this record now, 40 years ago, do you kind of have a different attachment or look at it with a different perspective now than when you did back then? Or when you're playing it, it almost feels like it's the Armored Saint from 1984?
Yeah. I mean, I look at it differently. Obviously, it's was a long time ago, and it's funny because it almost didn't dawn on me until recently. Somebody brought it up, reminded me, 40 years later, and it's sort of an anniversary of sorts. But you know, it's someone was asking me yesterday, like, what does that record, what do these records mean to you, And that record, I look at it like it was our firstborn. So, for that reason, it has a lot of, it holds dear to all of us for a lot of reasons. It's been kind of widely discussed from us that at the time we were in a different, I mean, that was where this record represents where we were at that moment. So it's a snapshot of where we were. All those songs were written. We were very young, 19 years old when we wrote all that music. So when we made the record, it was all brand new to us. And so we didn't really know yet how to manage our own career, and we didn't know how to do a lot of things within the business side of things. So at the time of making it, we were a little bit frustrated because it was our first time working with a big record company with a lot of people trying to have influence within the band. And we felt like it was affecting the sound of our music at that time. So it was a learning process, if you will, the beginning of it anyway. So that record for us in the beginning, even when it first came out, was a little bittersweet because we felt like the producer kind of took away some of the sound and energy that we felt like we had in the garage where we were from. And we also had some business people from the record company having influence on us. So it was kind of tarnished that record a little bit for us. But at the same time, look, hindsight's always a little different, especially 40 years later. So, I look at it like it was our firstborn, and it was a great experience. It was fun making it. We were in a world-class studio it was just an amazing experience. Like it was like a dream come true, and we were like little kids running around a candy store. So I'll never forget that feeling, and that part of it was a great moment. And it set us up for where we are now. So it's hard for me to even look down upon it negatively, really, at all, in that sense. So we're all super grateful, and we're stoked that, 40 years later, we're talking about this now, and that's far exceeds any dream we ever had when we were little 19-year-old punks.
Well, I mean, and the evolution that has been prevalent through all of Armored Saint, because when you put out, Raising Fear and Saints Will Conquer, Symbol of Salvation, Win Hands Down, all forth, there's a lot of evolution. I felt like Armored Saint always had the edge to it that made us gravitate towards it, but there was a lot of evolution, the technical proficiency, the songwriting, and then, you look back at that. Does the 19-year-old kid that you mentioned when making this album, when you have to revisit that material playing live on like a current album cycle or something like that, do you almost have to dig and channel in that 19-year-old? Do you almost have to kind of bring that back with you? Or being that we've all matured so much, you kind of are able to approach those songs basically from like a different technical level, and you've learned so much that you can maybe approach those songs with a different headspace?
Yeah, you do because, on the surface, if I look at it too closely, the songs are the songwriting was very sort of juvenile, but I mean, of course it was. We were 19 years old, so these were some of the first songs we ever wrote, period, in our lives. So of course it's a little juvenile, and you feel like 40 years later I'm a different songwriter now than I was 40 years ago. So you have to kind of get over that and say, look, appreciate for what it is, and then you approach it with the energy that you have today, and try to give it the current energy. So yeah, you do have to sort of put that hat back on and reevaluate how you see it and appreciate it.
And as the bass player of the band, you were one of the many bass players that I thought stood out in this genre of music. I know that in the world of rock and roll, we've heard our fair share of bass player jokes and bass player memes and whatnot. But the way that you're able, it's such an important instrument, being that it has an emphasis on both rhythm and melody. So when it comes to laying down your bass parts and what you channel into it, like, where are you like kind of looking at the arrangement of riffs first, or are you kind of like listening to the rhythm? How do you sort of like bring your aspects to it? Because even like on your work with Fate's Warning, for example, and all the other projects you've been involved with, I could tell that it's still your bass playing at the same time.
That's very nice of you to say, and I love hearing that, because that's I hope that's coming across. And the way maybe not the way I've always approached it, but the way I've been approaching it, and for the last 20 years at least, maybe a little longer, is I always look at the big picture. So when I was young, it was more about like, keeping up with like, Steve Harris and Geezer Butler and the guys that were influencing me, and trying to make an impression. But at the same time, my roots come from a wide variety of music. So I grew up listening to not only hard rock from the 70s, but I was also listening to a lot of R&B at the time. So I think that the R&B thing, and also some jazz fusion along the way in the 70s, kind of made its way into the way I look at bass playing, no matter who I'm sitting in with, So when I look at it, to answer your question, I kind of look at the big picture, because to me, it's all about the song. It's not about my bass part, it's not about the riff. It's not about just the vocal. No, it's not just about one thing. It's about the big picture, the song. What's going to serve the song the best? Sometimes it's served best by me channeling Cliff Williams from AC/DC, and if that's what the song needs, I'll give it that, So I try to put my ego aside and my whole, what I think I need to do as a personal bass player. I put that aside. Like, I want to serve the song first. And sometimes if I'm allowed to play with that a little more, then I will look at what's going on specifically. To answer your question, you kind of hit it right. I look at the rhythm, and the first thing I do is the kick drum and the snare drum. That's where it starts. I want to play with that. The guitar parts, and this is in particular with Armored Saint music. If it's a great riff, and it feels like the bass should play the riff, then I'll make the bass play with the riff. If I feel like it would be more interesting to have a counter to the riff, then I won't play the riff, and I'll play something completely independent, but playing with the kick and snare and the drums. And then there's the vocal part. Melodically speaking, I never want to step on the vocal melodies. So if I'm playing melodically, it has to accentuate what's going on with the vocal parts. So I guess I'm giving you too much information, but that's how I'm looking at the big picture. How does it fit rhythmically? Is it helping the song move along? Does it help the melody? If I play with the melody or counter the melody, you know. And again, it isn't about like me shining out, like, how can I make the bass seem like the coolest thing ever? It isn't that at all. It's more about the song, the big picture. And if you look at, if you listen to kind of like how I move a song along, I don't always do this, but a lot of times I do this, and pretty frequently, whether it's Faiths or Armored Saint or anything else, I'll tend to lay low and simple in the beginning of the song, and then I get a little more active in the middle of the song. Then I'll go back to being simple towards the last third of the song. But then in the last third of the song, you'll hear me go off way more melodically. And that's because it's like I sort of see it as like a symphony. And so you'll hear things in the crescendo of a symphony. A lot of things start getting busier towards the end of a song, of a concerto or something. And that's sort of how I interpretate my bass part within the context of even a metal song.
Well, you pretty much just answered like the next three questions I was gonna have ask about
Sorry.
basically. No, I appreciate it. It saves us a bit of time, but like, because I was gonna ask if because Armored Saint, I feel like is a very structured band, and I mean that as a compliment. Where like it's quick, it's to the point, it hits you square in the face. I've had the privilege of seeing Armored Saint multiple times with on the headlining tour that you did with Monty Pittman and on the Queensryche tour at Irving Plaza. Great times, but like with a band like Fates Warning, for example, it's very progressive music. You listen to Theories of Flight or Disconnected. It's not following as traditional of a structure. So on either just a technical level or even like an emotional level, do you feel like you express a different side of yourself, or is it a different creative mind frame? You sort of just answered this, but like, do we maybe see different sides of who Joey Vera is depending on what project we're listening to?
Yeah, I think that's pretty true. Again, I play for the songs, I play for the project. My playing is very different between Fates Warning versus Motor Sister, which is another band I have with some friends. Scott Ian and Pearl Ledea, John Tempesta, and and Jim Wilson, and that's a whole different mindset, and I play differently in that group. I play differently in Armored Saint. I play differently in Fates. Whatever. Kevin Moore's, Dead Air for Radios, I played differently on that. It depends on the project. So yeah, you will see different different personality traits coming out in that. Playing with Fates Warning is a challenging one for me because it's not really in my wheelhouse, so to speak. When I joined the band, it was something that I had to learn to be a part of. But being in that band made me a much better musician all around, not just a better bass player. So, so I think my vocabulary has sort of widened since 1994 or 5 when I joined Fates. So my personality is definitely a little different, not only on record, but on stage as well. People will come see me like they've never seen me. Let's say they've seen me with Fates Warning several times, but they've never seen Armored Saint. And they go to see Armored Saint and they're like, holy crap, like, who are you? It's a completely different person. And, it's like that with everything. I'm a little bit different with Motor Sister and a little different with Fates. And, I had a different experience playing with Merciful Fate, so it's, like I said, if someone asked me, like, which is the true Joey Vera then? If you're you're like a guy with a different mask with every band, so which one is the true Joey Vera, and I say, well, it's all me. This is just, I react and play to how the music makes me feel, and I don't take gigs that I'm not in 100%. I'm not just there for a paycheck or just to do it for a gig, It's not like I'm not playing in a top 40 cover band collecting $40 at the end of the night or whatever. I never do that. So everything I do 100%. So you're seeing me wherever I am.
You're like the Mike Patton as you're like Mike Patton as a bassist.
That's a compliment.
Yeah,
I love Mike Patton.
Genius, absolute genius of a vocalist.
Yeah.
You got to collaborate with him. That would be awesome.
I'd love to.
In order to when it comes to being this creative though, and you have to lay down your parts more towards with songwriting, isolation is such a great fuel for creativity. So do you prefer to be alone when there's nothing between you and the instrument to lay down your parts, or because you work so well within a band, and I've seen you get lost with both Fates and Armored Saint, you prefer to kind of be with the band when laying down your parts?
Well, there's an advantage to doing both things. I mean, it's kind of the old school method is, the way we all start out, just going into a room and jamming and basically just being a band in a room. And I don't get a lot of chance to do that these days because just of the nature of a lot of things, technology and all that stuff. And I'm in bands that are not in the same city, Fates Warning being the best example of that. We live all over the place. The only group I really sort of do that with, and I mean go into a room, write songs, write songs, go into a studio, play as a band in the same room at the same time, is Motor Sister. And that's a great release for me because it sort of reminds me of where I started from back when I was a punk teenager. Nowadays, a lot of things, in particular with Armored Saint and Fates Warning, where songwriting and parts, is, in particular, answer your question as far as writing my parts and so forth. Those things are done a little more remotely because we share files with each other. Songwriting is done a little more via file sharing, as opposed to going into the room and hashing it out. So to be honest with you, I actually prefer to write my parts this way. I like to be alone. I write alone mostly, and I like to put my parts mostly alone as well. And the other interesting thing maybe for some people is that when recording my parts, which is sometimes where my parts in particular are becoming the final parts, I prefer to do them at the very end of everything. So I'd rather the drums have the drum track done first, the guitar tracks are done, the melodies are already associated with the song, the lead vocal parts are at least written and I can hear them. I prefer to put my bass on at the end of all that. And it's kind of for the reasons that I stated a little earlier about melodically not getting in the way of the vocals and rhythmically not getting in the way of anything else happening in the track. I found that sometimes, when I put my parts down at the very beginning of a project, there were a lot of times where I would say, oh, I didn't know the singer was going to do that. I wish I wouldn't have played this part, or I didn't know that the lead guitar player was going to do this during the solo because I could have added something and it would have helped elevate it. And so I like to have the big picture in front of me so I could help, influence the song, if you will, subtly. So I prefer to do that towards the end of the project.
And then this leads me perfectly into what I wanted to discuss. I have two more questions for you, if you're cool with that. It's the live show. First off, this is sort of like a brain picky question because when you're playing live, you are just theoretically taking the songs you wrote on the album and you're replicating them in a live setting. I feel like you don't have to play any different notes or anything like that. So is there anything remotely creative about playing live?
Well, yeah, I think there is. I mean, I'm a fan of, when I go see a band, and let's say there's just a classic guitar lead that I know note for note, I kind of want to hear it when I go see it live. I want to hear that played you know, almost note for note. Doesn't have to be exact, but I want to hear most of it. But I do appreciate the occasional, you know, what do you call it? You know, going off the rails a little bit, or improvising on the spot. And I think that every band needs to have a little bit of that. So it's, you know, I'm a fan of seeing the songs I want to hear and expect, but I also like little surprises at the same time, because it shows the audience that you're not just replicating the exact same thing that they can listen to at home. There's a different experience, and it's only happening right then at that moment. The next day, it's going to be a little bit different. And the day after that, it's going to be different again. So I think that there's something really special about seeing live music. And I think that it's that sort of danger and unexpected energy that you don't get from listening to the CD or the record over and over and over. So I do appreciate that. And I always make room, me personally, I make room for little bits of like improvisation or egging the song on somehow that's not on the record. So again, I get a little bit angry when I go see my favorite drummers. Let's say I'm a huge drummer fan, and I want to play air drums to this favorite drum part that I hear on the record, and if they don't do it exactly the same, I do get a little pissed. But hey, in another part of the song, they might throw something else in there that I didn't expect, and I'd be like, okay, got my money's worth.
I could picture you like doing it, and then they make something off, and then you just kind of like stall. It's like when you like you go to shake somebody's hand, and then you miss it.
Yeah.
It kind of like
Like
has,
the high five.
Yep.
Oh,
yep.
Dude.
Yep. I
Left
feel like
me hanging.
And with an Armored Saint show, just the stage presence and the way that you all just channel so much energy into your live show. Like to me, like I feel like there's very few, like there's some bands where I kind of want to sit and just watch, you know, I observe it, I like to listen to it. There's plenty of bands I see live where I could like close my eyes and just kind of vibe out, but I just feel the energy when you're playing live. Is stage presence and the crowd interaction that you all have, is that something you could really practice, or can you really rehearse that in a way, or does that just kind of like, I know it's kind of silly, like did you guys have to play in front of puppets or like look in the mirror or something?
Nah, I mean, I never do that. Like, if you watch me at rehearsal, I can be in rehearsal for 14 days straight, and you'd think I was in a shoegaze band. You know, I just stand there. I don't interact in that way, but not in rehearsals anyway. So to answer your question, we don't really, when we're at rehearsal, we're not jumping off the walls like and going nuts like you see us on stage, but we are moving around a little bit because it is exercise what we're doing. It's not very cardiovascular. So we do have to move around a little bit, but I don't know. There's just nothing about that energy on stage. Our practice really comes in when we actually start touring. So the first day of the tour, our first date, is always like just an explosion. It's just a bomb goes off. And the next day we are all so sore. But, you get back up and you do it again. And then a couple days later, you start wearing off that soreness, start getting into groove, you get into shape. And then by the following week, that's when we're firing at all pistons and we're up to speed and we're all hanging in there. It takes a lot of energy, especially at this age, to do this. We were just influenced by a lot of really heavy rock bands in the 70s that were just great to watch, great performers. And that's just something that we always wanted to do. And since day one, it was like, we just have to go out and just go nuts. I mean, that was our credo since day one.
And I could tell you, You definitely do go nuts. It's astonishing to see that, and that's why like an Armored Saint show is, I feel like, always an experience that you're not going to get with other bands. There's certain bands you see live that, like, oh, it reminds me of this band, or reminds me of this band, or this would be a great package. I think an Armored Saint show is an Armored Saint show, and it can't be replicated. So.
Oh, that's nice of you to say. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, of course. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time, and congratulations again for such a long and epic career, and thank you for continuing to give us new music. Just what else can we be expecting from Armored Saint for 2024, if you're allowed to say at this time, of course?
Yeah, we have a new single coming out in June, and it's just a single. We did a cover song of an old R&B tune that we're all fans of, by a group called the Four Tops, and it was just a lot of fun to do. John killed it. It's don't worry, it's not an R&B song. It's very much an Armored Saint, heavy tune, but it's got tons of groove and great performance from John. And that's coming out. We also shot a video for it. It's coming out on Metal Blade. It's going to be available digital only, but it's the first time we've ever released a single only. All the kids are doing it these days, so hey. But so that's coming out in June. That's really exciting. And then we're also writing music for a new record, and we're probably 6-7 songs in at this point. We're still trying to write during our downtime and in between touring and playing and stuff. So hopefully, looking for a 25 release, most likely a late 25 release, but we're trying to get that done and out. And the songs are sounding killer, and we're just doing our thing. Like, we're trying to write another record that's just different from the last one, but also Armored Saint and exciting and familiar things, but also some chances. So we're stoked.
And we are very stoked too. Can't wait to hear it.
Cool.
Thank you so much,
Thanks
Joey.
for having me.
Anytime. Everybody, Joey of Armored Saint. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.
See ya.
That was perfect, man. Thank you so much.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.